I'm realizing that this is everybody's story. This is not just a Black story. Everybody, as I said before, is dealing with forgiveness and issues of forgiveness.
Hey, so as Ryan said, I'm Jacob with Screenfish, and I am a full-time United Methodist pastor who really loves movies. And so I get the opportunity to have conversations like this that kind of bridge my interest and my job. So first off, thanks for the movie. It's definitely given me a lot to think about. I'm curious what it's been like to put forgiveness out there as this thing we aim for, and enter into conversations with people who may completely disagree with you about what it means to forgive somebody. What's that been like?
First of all, Jacob, thank you so much for having me on and talking with me. I appreciate that. It has been remarkable. The thing that I've realized as we've done dozens and dozens of screenings at this point is everybody, no matter what background you come from, has something to say about forgiveness.
Sure.
Everybody. And so this film isn't one where I'm trying to tell people what to believe. We don't give you any easy answers in the film. We don't break things down into heroes and villains. That's not what happens. What I am now realizing is happening with the film is it's making space for people's process, and people take away very different things from the film. I was talking before about this. My aunt, who raised me after that attic scene, my aunt, she took me in before I was, moved to a bunch of different family members' house and so on and so forth. Her and her son came to see the film, and my cousin Jonathan, who has a father very similar to my father. At the end of the film, my aunt said a couple of things. She said, first, we told him not to take you out that day when you stepped on that nail. He just did you the same way Daddy did him. And she said, but Ty, I am so happy that that the character forgave him in the end. And to that, my cousin said, he didn't forgive him. What are you talking? And so they had a feisty debate about whether that was really forgiveness or not. And I say that just to say the thing that I've realized about this film is people take away what they need to take away from the film, and that to me is kind of a success story. I'm not trying to be didactic or like teach you a lesson in the traditional sense. I think I've learned so much from the people who have watched this film.
One of the things that happens when you're a pastor who covers movies is I get sent a lot of movies that are specifically Christian. And sometimes forgiveness is wrapped up in a cute little Hallmark box with a bow on top and snow falling in the background. And in my own life, I have not found forgiveness to be linear. And
Yeah.
I greatly appreciate that at the end of the movie, I just kind of sat in silence for 15 minutes in my office asking what forgiveness looked like. So,
Mm.
um, can you tell me from your own experience, um, how you get to the point where you're ready to make forgiveness this main thing, but
Yeah.
it is messy.
You know, um, I'm 48 and I have two sons, 17 and 15. My oldest is going off to college next year. And I'm I'm thinking a lot about what I want him to carry with him
Hmm.
as he moves into manhood, and what I don't want him to carry with him. What I don't want him to carry with him is this burden that I've been toting around for most of my life. I don't want that to be a part of his character. I don't want that to hold him down. And so this whole process really started because I wanted to write something to my sons about my experience. Throughout their youth, they would always ask me about my relationship with my father. And I would always say stuff like, I'll tell you more when you get older. I don't have the time to say, I'll tell you more later. And so that is really inspire this process. But if you had asked me, I don't know, 5 years before I started this process about my father, I would have described my father as the villain of my narrative. And it
Right.
was through the writing process that I discovered that that's not true. And the reason is because when you write and you're writing a character, it goes from your narrative to becoming a character. You have to understand the motivations of that character. And people who do bad things don't consider themselves bad people. So if you're going to write honestly, you have to ask yourself, I had to ask myself, why did my father do that? What was he motivated by? And in that process, I realized that my father is as much a victim in this narrative as anybody else is. It was then that I realized the complexity of my grandfather and the things that my father went through at the hands of my grandfather. And so this project has been a journey of healing for me that I did not expect. Wasn't, wrapped up in a nice bow, because that's just not how addiction works. It's just
Right.
not. I'm very, very tired. And I actually think it's problematic that there are so many films that attempt to wrap it up in a nice bow like that. And the reason it's problematic is for those of us for whom life is actually complicated, you look at those things with some kind of an expectation or longing that,
Right.
maybe it could be like that. Or maybe I'm doing something wrong because it's not like that. I wanted to make sure that we told the story in a way that, as I said, left space for people's process, as opposed to like tell them this is what you're supposed to think.
I mean, I thought it was beautiful. I'm 47. I have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old. 17-year-old's going off to college.
Yeah.
I grew up in a pretty sheltered suburban setting. My dad's dad died when he was 7, and he was raised by his mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching that film, seeing your story through the lens of the choices my dad had to make. His mom didn't tell him that she loved him until he was in his 40s. So
Mm.
there, I mean, I know I'm doing some comparison. I'm not trying to say they're the same thing, but I see all the ways that fathers and sons are trying to figure out how to take the part we want to hold on to and leave the parts we have to leave
Yes.
behind.
Yes.
I don't think that gets talked enough. I mean, we have a lot of mother-daughter stories.
Mm.
I think we need more father-son stories.
Yeah. And father mother stories too. I mean, you talk about your
Yeah,
mother and his father. That, I mean, your father and his mother. I mean,
yeah,
that is a part of this story as well. And the other thing is, you were talking about making the comparison, as you should. The thing that I'm excited about is I'm realizing that this is everybody's story. This is not just a Black story. Everybody, as I said before, is dealing with forgiveness and issues of forgiveness and in some kind of a way or another. And that has meant that at the end of every single screening, we have people coming up to us and it gets deep immediately.
yeah, I bet.
No, we I should warn you, if you go see this film with somebody, you are going to have a very deep conversation after. Whether you like it or not, that's about to be what happens. But it is about, for me, it is about that next generation. And that is the hope of the film. We talk about the past and we talk about the hard things, but this film is about generational healing, about our sons and our sons' sons, right? That we don't pass on these curses to the next generation. If we don't do this work, if we refuse to do this work and we just continue to do the things that was done to us, then we don't have healing for our children in the future. And they end up carrying the burdens that we should have let go a long time of.
I think that'll preach. And so I have a faith question for you and an art
Sure.
question for you.
Sure.
Um, I felt like watching the movie. I'm in a I'm a United Methodist, but I'm in a Southern Baptist world, and there's sometimes an expectation that if you just pray about it or you say the right scripture over it, that everything works out.
Yeah.
And I like the way that you wove together the mom's faith, the dad's newfound faith, and trying to figure out where to stand in that. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too, I mean, I feel like you
No,
put it all out there. Is that too personal to touch on?
not not at all.
Okay.
I like having this conversation. I say it this way: the people who love me most in the world are believers. I wouldn't be here without people of faith in my life. There's not a day that has gone by that I have even once wondered whether God was real. That's not my struggle at all. Um, I, my father, before he slipped, was a minister. My grandfather was a minister, and I actually went to seminary for a year myself as well before I realized that wasn't my calling. This is not this for me, like the role of faith in this film is about trying to be honest about faith and trying to be honest about where we doubt. And I think that's the character of Tarrell is he's obviously rooted in this the faith of his family, of his mother in particular. But he is struggling with certain aspects of it. And it's kind of like what you were saying before. There's sometimes this desire to just think that I can just tell you the scripture and it's gonna solve the problem. And in certain contexts, if you resist that idea, you're a heathen. Something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I think what Tarrell ultimately is doing in the film, and what I was doing with my mother, is I was saying, Mom, I know I understand all that, but this still hurts. This is still really painful. And I want to talk about it. I don't want you to just tell me to read a scripture. Like I want a process with you. And that's a difficult thing for a man to say. It's a very, very difficult thing for a man to say. And in many ways, the generation we came from, our fathers weren't telling us that it was okay to cry. You know,
Right.
our mothers weren't telling us it was okay to cry. We weren't taught that feeling our feelings was actually a good thing. We were taught to suppress them, to push them down. Like you show affection to your buddy by hitting him in the arm. Like
Right.
that's what we were taught. And so if we want our sons to continue on that path and it be the same thing and they'd be disconnected from their emotions and frankly not be the kind of husbands and fathers we want to see in the world, if that's what we want, then we just keep doing what our fathers and mothers did to us. If we want something different, we got to do something different. So I don't know if that answers the question totally, but there it is.
Well, if I'm honest, the people who've hurt me the worst in my life are people who also claim to believe the same things I do.
Mm,
And I think that one of the things that I walked away professionally from the film was asking, what do we have to do to get to the point where we can be honest in church?
mm, yeah,
And I mean, I know a lot of the movies about family, but professionally, I have to look at it and go, oh, wait a minute. There are a lot of families that would be made whole if they could be honest about their family and their faith at the same time. And
yeah.
church would be a place where that can happen.
You know, you know the scene in the film where he's talking to his mother on the park bench, and they're
Yes.
talking about Abraham and Isaac.
Yeah.
Um, I'd heard that sermon from the pulpit my whole life. I read the scripture, and I've seen multiple pastors, preachers talk on that, and it was just something that just went into my mind like all of the other sermons, and I didn't really think about it honestly that much. I knew that it was supposed to be about the evidence of someone's faith, about Abraham's. He was so faithful.
Right.
But then my first son was born. And the nurse put my boy in my hands. And a few Sundays later, I went to church and I heard that sermon and I said, no way. There's no way. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like this makes sense to me. There's no circumstance under which I would ever put a knife to my son's throat. I would never do that. There's no justification for doing that. And I can't even see a reason why a loving God would ask something like that. And I'm not going to pretend it makes sense to me anymore. And if because of that you want to paint me as someone who doesn't believe, that's okay. God knows my heart. But
Yeah.
what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to sit around and pretend before God that something makes sense to me that doesn't make sense to me. He has put it in my heart to protect that boy, to protect those children. And that's my most important job in this entire world.
I'm right there with you about Abraham and Isaac. I preached it kind of stupidly. Um, the Father's Day after my son had turned 1. And I stood
Mm.
up there and I said, there's no way I could have done that. And I don't really think that I believe in a God who'd ask me to either.
Wait, why would you say that was stupidly? That
I
doesn't
mean,
sound.
no. It was stupid emotionally to try to. I mean, like I was a hot mess by the time I got done
Oh,
delivering my sermon. Like
yeah.
I mean, I was whatever 30 and still trying to figure out how to be a pastor and a dad. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sitting here grinning because I went through the same process. Like,
Yeah.
no way, dude. There's no way.
No.
All right.
No.
I know I'm running out of time, and I was blown away by the visuals.
Mm.
And did you, I mean, I'm assuming you did. Did you make the art that's depicted in the movie?
Yeah. So I made all of the paintings. I am a painter. That's my real job. This directing thing is, this is just me moonlighting.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know if you're going to be moonlighting for very long, though. I mean, come on. Like it's stellar, and I don't say that loosely.
I so appreciate that. Yeah, the cool thing is actually the paintings are if you're in LA or close to LA, the paintings are on view in Beverly Hills at Gagosian Gallery. So,
Okay.
I at the end of the film, there's actually a QR code that can take you to all of the paintings in the film, so you can get some close-ups
I
of the
missed
painting.
that. I'll have to go back and pull it up again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you probably watched it on a specific
Yeah,
link
yeah,
that
yeah. Right.
you. So when you watch it in the theaters,
Okay.
that comes up at the end of every film. So October 18th, it's in theaters nationwide, and not just your fancy theaters, but like your
Sure.
regular real people theaters, AMC, Cinemark, Regis, like those kind of things. That's where to be.
Well, I thought it was fantastic, and I don't want to even put in the interview the the wrap up at the end in the I'm going to say the adaptation of the painting. I mean, like
Oh,
I stopped breathing. I was like, I mean, I know it was cathartic for you, but there was real power in filming André Holland doing that in the movie. I mean, like
yeah.
that was just good movie making. I mean, dang. Like, anyway, yeah. I
I
had,
know what you're talking about, and I know it's hard because you're trying not to spoil it.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I appreciate. I appreciate.
Oh man, I'm like, I can see it playing in my head over here, and I'm trying to like kind of bring it in for the interview, but like that that showed that you weren't just a guy who was living his life, a guy who was telling about his life, an artist who was painting something. In that scene, for me, if I was going to sell you as a filmmaker, that would be the scene that I would show because you nailed that.
Man, I appreciate that so much, Jacob. Thank you so much, man.
I
It
mean,
means a lot.
it was crazy. I'm telling you, I'm sitting here watching on my computer, and I'm like, I've been sucked in by this whole thing, and we get to the end, and yeah, I mean, that was worth the price of admission right there.
Damn. Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that.
So I'm sure that I've used up my time. It has been a pleasure to meet you. And I pray that you continue to facilitate these conversations and provide healing to the people that you get to share your story with.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can
Yeah,
talk again.
absolutely. Take care.